Welcome to Uncolored. I'm Kevin Metcalf. Thanks for tuning in again. I'm going to continue this idea that I talked about last week with regard to a quote that Louis Beck made, or at least is attributed to Louis Beck, who's a smart guy, philosopher. He said that anybody who could believe in God could believe in anything. And I challenged that idea to see if it's true. And I came to the conclusion that I don't necessarily think that that's true. Now, certainly people who believe in God, there are some folks who have crazy ideas. But there's also some crazy, crazy ideas with people who don't believe in God. And I brought up one idea called a limited materialism, which just the brief description that I gave, it just seems wacky. And it's hard to believe how someone can hold that idea. And these are very intelligent people. Do not get me wrong. But that makes it even more stunning to me because they're not dummies. These are people who spend their time reading and thinking and studying and doing all this stuff. And it just seems like some of these ideas that they land on, to me, just seem nuts. So there's another example, of one that I want to show you because I want you to hear it from them. I don't want to misquote people. I want you to hear it from them. And I'll stop from time to time just to show you some of the things, the problems that I have with it. Again, she's far smarter than me, but some of the things sound crazy. But first, what I wanted to do was read to you just an idea of what materialism is, or at least the idea that it holds. Materialism is an idea that basically says everything that is real is just matter and energy. So this is from the Blackwell Companion to Natural Theology. I'm not sure who's doing this chapter. I'm not going to make a guess, but this is from this book here. And what this person is doing, he's not a materialist. This is someone who defends theism, just so you know. But he's giving a general description of materialism as he understands it, and he'll let you know that any idea is not monolithic, generally speaking. There's always different versions of it. There are very strong adherents to a particular idea and have, very stringent, hold stringently to the idea. Some people are a little bit loose about it. Some have column A, some have column B, and they're more less strong in their adherence to a particular idea. So you're going to get different versions, and the author here makes that clear. But here's a reading just so you can get a background if you're not familiar with materialism. I think this explains it pretty well. It says, let us call the naturalist creation account the grand story. Because naturalists have to have an account of why everything is here, just like people who believe in God have a story. We also have a story that we get from Genesis. Well, naturalists also have a story too, and this author refers to it as the grand story. So here at the bottom of the page, it starts and says, let us call the naturalist creation account the grand story. All of reality, space, time, and matter came from the Big Bang, and various heavenly bodies developed as the universe expanded. On at least the Earth, some sort of prebiotic soup scenario explains how living things came into being from non-living chemicals. That gets into abiogenesis, something we'll talk about later with James Tour. Well, I won't talk with James Tour, but James Tour has a bunch of material on that, and we'll look at some of that. And as the process of evolution, understood in either neo-Darwinian or punctuated equilibrium terms, gave rise to all of the life forms we see, including human beings. Thus, all organisms and their parts exist and are what they are because they contributed to, or at least did not hinder, the struggle for reproductive advantage. More specifically, because they contributed to the task of feeding, fighting, fleeing, and reproducing. That was originally the 4 Fs, but, for obvious purposes, they changed it to reproducing. The grand story has 3 key features, okay? The first at its core are 2 theories that result from combinatorial models of explanation, the atomic theory of matter and evolutionary theory. If we take John Searle to be representative of naturalists here, this means that causal explanations, specifically bottom-up but not top-down causal explanations, are central to the alleged explanatory superiority of the grand story. Second, it expresses a scientistic philosophical monism. Scientistic is the idea that science explains everything and that there are no ways to know anything outside of science. That's what scientistic means. According to which everything that exists or happens in the world is susceptible to explanations by natural scientific methods. Prima facie, I don't know how to say that. The most consistent way to understand the naturalism in this regard is to see it as entailing some version of strong physicalism. Everything that exists is fundamentally matter, most likely elementary particles, whether taken as points of potentiality, centers of mass energy, units of spatially extended stuff waves, or reduced to eliminated in favor of fields, organized in various ways to the laws of nature. By keeping track of these particles and their physical traits, we're keeping track of everything that exists. That's very important to understand. For the materialist, or at least this brand of materialist, nothing exists outside of matter, energy, physical laws, etc. No non-physical entities exist, including emergent ones. When naturalists venture away from strong physicalism, however, they still argue that additions to strong physicalist ontology must be depicted as rooted in, emergent from, and dependent on the physical states and events of the grand story. Now, the reason that's there is because some naturalists, like the eliminative materialists, will say that the mind doesn't exist and that whatever we call believing, thinking, all those things, it's not that, it's something else, and later on in science we'll figure it out. But there are some materialists who recognize that we do think, right? We have minds and thought processes, that there's something that that we do that makes us responsible for our actions, which a materialist account of reality simply, it's incompatible with. Because obviously, if you're not in control of what you do, then you can't reasonably or logically be held responsible for the things you do. But, most people, reasonable people, would say that you are responsible for the things that you do, and therefore you're going to be punished for if you do something wrong, or you should be rewarded if you did something right. Well, if materialism is true, then there's no reason to punish or reward anybody, because you're simply meat robots just doing whatever your programming says. And if that sounds wrong, wait till you hear from the person that I'm going to bring up here. So they continue in the book. Third, the grand story is constituted by event causality and eschews both irreducible teleology and agent causation, which the first relatum of the causal relation is in the category of substance and not event. The grand story is deterministic in two senses: diachronically, such that the state of the universe at any time t, coupled with the laws of nature, determine or fix the chances for the state of the universe at the subsequent times, and synchronically, such that features and changes regarding macro wholes are dependent and determined by micro phenomena. Now, let me see if I can explain that, which if I have this correct, and I think the person that I'm going to bring up will illustrate this better. What they're saying, and I did this in a previous video, I should have brought up that graphic that I did. Maybe I'll put it here. But the idea is this: because everything is fixed in the past from the Big Bang, and there's no purpose, no creator, you have just this cascade of things that happen. It's almost like if you took a bag of marbles and just dumped it out. The marbles would just land kind of wherever with no plan or purpose. Now, what the naturalist is saying, or the materialist is saying, if I understand correctly, is that's how we got to today. Just some random chance, probabilistic things happen. And now you and I sit here and listen and think and learn and do all the things that we do. What the problem with that is this. This reference to the diachronistically or the synchronistic causation or determinism, is that if that's the case, then whatever state of affairs obtains at this particular moment, whether it's the littlest thing, a particle, or the whole universe as a whole, every event in the universe, this state of affairs was determined by a previous state of affairs in the previous moment. And that state of affairs also determined by a previous state of affairs. So what you're going to get is this state of affairs in a linear fashion that happens one after another, after another, after another, after another, from the beginning of whatever, if there's a beginning. Some people deny that there is a beginning of our existence, of our particular universe, to the present moment, and this will continue on. And what that means is there are no decisions that are ever made about anything. Whatever you do at this moment has been predetermined by the past moment. So while you think you might be making a decision being one thing or another, that's not what's going on. While it may seem that today, like when you tell your kids, hey, you really want to work hard so that you'll have all of these options available to you when you graduate high school or graduate college, or you can be whatever you want to be, according to the materialist, you're lying to your kid. Because according to the materialist, whatever your kid will be was determined at the Big Bang, at that very moment. Because we're just involved in this material process of things happening. Now, the problem with that is that suddenly there is no person anymore. Well, there's a lot of problems with that. I'll get to that later. Maybe before I go too further, I should show you what the video that I want to show you. But let's get back to the book just to sort of preview some of the issues that we're going to be dealing with. So the next section here talks about the location problem. Well, let me start at the top. There's a distinction between strong, strict, and weak naturalist. The one you're going to hear from, I think, is a strong naturalist, the one I'm going to show you. Strong naturalists accept a strict version of physicalism. All individuals, events, states of affairs, properties, relations, and laws are entirely physical for the natural world, while weak naturalists embrace various emergent entities. Those are the two we talked about earlier. So then it goes into here where it talks about the location problem. A good place to start for more detailed analysis of a naturalist ontology is with what Frank Jackson calls the location problem. On the basis of the superiority of the naturalist epistemology, naturalists accept a fairly widely accepted physical story about how things came to be and what they are. The location problem is the task of locating some entity in that story. I mentioned probably before the kind of explanatory resources. And some ideas have very strong explanatory resources. They can explain lots of things. And there are other ideas that lack explanatory resources, at least for some of the things that they're trying, or at least say that they can explain. And I think materialism is one of these ideas. Well, what happens is when you have an idea that doesn't have enough explanatory resources to deal with the phenomena that you're trying to deal with, then the question is, what do you do with that? So, for example, it seems as though we think, we make decisions, we have emotions and beliefs. But if materialism is true, none of those things can be the case. You can't believe anything. You simply exist in a particular state of affairs where your chemicals make you think something is the case. Whether you believe it or not, I don't know how you can instantiate that on a materialist viewpoint. Because a belief seems like it's saying that, well, there was this thing over here and there was this thing over here, and this thing seemed the more probable thing, so that's what I'm going to go with. So it seems like there's some sort of a deliberation going on. But if materialism is true, there's no such deliberations going on. It's just you have, again, a set of chemicals in your brain or some state of affairs, some neurophysical state that you're in. And because of that state, you adhere to something. Now, whether it's true or not, Who the heck knows? Why? Because you are going to believe that from the beginning of human history, from the beginning of the Big Bang, all of the chemicals and physical properties of reality determine that this idea you would have. So whether it's true or not, I don't know how you even know that. That seems to be a problem. So the location problem talks about, well, how do you locate these things, or what do you do with these things that seem to be true, but materialism can't explain? That's what he's talking about at this stage. So he says, for Jackson, the naturalist must either locate a problematic entity in the basic story or eliminate it. Roughly, an entity is located in the basic story just in case it is entailed by that story. Otherwise, the entity must be eliminated. At this point, it's worth recalling that Kim and others have complained that it does not explain a phenomenon by labeling it supervenient. What it means is those materialists who don't deny that the will is a thing, but will say, yeah, the will, we do think, we do feel, all of those things. And you go, well, then how do you get a person who has a will, makes decisions, deliberates, comes to conclusions, who has something that calls knowledge, or at least can assign a truth value to the things that they say, which would be necessary? And again, it seems to me doesn't work with naturalism. How do you get that? Well, the answer you'll get is that it's a supervenient quality or an emergent quality. It means it just, and what they're saying is that there's this gap between their idea and the data that, or the phenomena that they're trying to explain. And so to bridge that gap is, in my opinion, the materialism of the gaps, which is supervenient or emerge. Just emerged. And to me, that always seems like a phony answer because, well, listen, if I could have used that answer in school, I could have, graduated valedictorian. If I could have just said, hey, it just emerged every time I didn't know the answer to something. And so it seems to me a phony story. And so apparently this person, Kim, that they're referring to in the book, agrees. Because he says, Kim and others have complained that one does not explain a phenomena by labeling it supervenient. Likewise, one might think that someone has not really located a puzzling phenomena if all one has done is point out that it necessarily co-varies with this or with that sort of physical phenomena. In other words, that one phenomena is somehow connected to or correlated to another phenomena doesn't necessarily explain that phenomenon. In any case, Jackson provides 3 examples of location. We're not going to get into that, but the point I'm making is, and I think the point I wanted to make is that materialism is a very strong and I think extreme radical idea. And when I say radical, I mean crazy. That's what I mean when I say radical. It's a nutty idea. And this is why I say that, because to hold to naturalism or materialism, you have to deny many of the things that it seems are real. And it seems you have to deny the things that you need to even come to that idea. That's how it looks to me. Again, I'm the least credible person talking about any of this stuff. I'm just telling you, when I'm reading these things, that's just how it seems to me. So let's listen to this video here that I brought up, and I think this is a perfect example of strong physicalism or materialism. So what I'd like you to do is just pay careful attention to what she says, because again, if just to set it up, determinism, this hard determinism says that there's a linear causal chain from one event to the next, and there's no possibility of anything different than what this state of affairs is. And whatever's going on, it's because of the prior state. Not because you deliberated, not because you thought, not because you weighed outcomes or any of those things like you would if you had a mind. None of that's going on. So just keep that in mind.
Today I want to talk about an issue that must have occurred to everyone who spent some time thinking about physics, which is that the idea of free will is both incompatible with the laws of nature and entirely meaningless. I know that a lot of people just do not want to believe this, but I think you are here to hear what the science says. So I will tell you what the science says. In this
Now, I find that interesting that she talks about wants. I think you're here, right? Do determined meatbags think? And by virtue of what do you think? That's, again, I'm not a scientist, so maybe they're all really great answers for these things. But again, I've read a lot, and I just don't see it. You know, I've read a lot of the Blackwell Companion. I've seen arguments for both sides. And I just don't see where you would get thinking from a materialistic process. Some collection of chemicals and neurons that seem to fire in a particular way and produced some event. I don't know how that's thinking. At least to me, thinking seems to have something to do with this independent ability to investigate, weigh options, evidence, those kinds of things. And I don't see how that happens in materialism, but she clearly seems to think that that's what's going on, that you want to hear evidence. And to me, that seems incompatible. Even that seems compatible with naturalism, at least from what we've read so far.
In this video, I first explain why free will does not exist, indeed makes no sense, and then tell you why there are better things to worry about.
And again, even that seems crazy. I don't have free will, but don't worry. Well, do I have the ability to do that, or do I not have the ability to do that? Again, you know, I did the same thing when I was going through Calvinism, because Calvinism has a system of determinism too. It's called theistic determinism. And theistic determinism is similar in to me, it's almost the same thing. It's just that for the theistic determinists, it's God who determines everything you do. Whereas with materialism, it seems like it's just nature that determines what you do. But it's that same linear causal chain that one event proceeds to the next event in materialism. And with the theistic materialism, it's just that whatever that circumstance is the only way it could be, because that's the way God made it. And so the idea that there's other possibilities don't seem to be compatible with that determinism. But what you'll hear determinists, theistic and materialist, atheistic determinists, continue to tell you or talk with you as if you can do all of the things that their determinism denies. They tell you to think. They try to persuade you of things, right? They say you're wrong and I'm right. They assign truth value to certain things. And I just don't know how you can do that if everything is already scripted. Well, scripted if you're a theistic materialist. Well, it's also scripted too for if you're an atheistic materialist or determinist, because again, from the beginning of time, whatever the atoms were doing, that's what they were doing, and this linear causation ensues. So it's interesting to me that determinists constantly talk as if their own theory is false, because they act like you can decide to do something other than what you were programmed to do. Just seems if you're programmed to do something, I don't know what I'm trying to even talk to you about stuff before. It seems like your programming should just take over.
I want to say ahead that there is much discussion about free will in neurology, where the question is whether we subconsciously make decisions before we become consciously aware of having made one. I am not a neurologist, so this is not what I'm concerned with here. I will be talking about free will as the idea that in this present moment there are several futures which are possible, and your free will plays a role for selecting which one of those possible futures becomes reality. This, I think, is how most of us intuitively think of free will, because it agrees with our experience of how the world seems to work. It is not how some philosophers have defined free will, and I will get to this later. But first, let me tell you what's wrong with this intuitive idea that we can somehow select among possible futures. Last week, I explained what differential equations are and that all laws of nature which we currently know work with those differential equations. These laws have the common property that if you have an initial condition at one moment in time, for example, the exact details of the particles in your brain and all your brain's inputs, then you can calculate what happens at any other moment in time from those initial conditions. This means, in a nutshell, that the whole story of the universe in every single detail was determined already at the Big Bang. We're just watching it play out. These deterministic laws of nature apply to you and your brain because you are made of particles, and what happens with you is a consequence of what happens with those particles. A lot of people seem to think this is a philosophical position. They call it materialism or reductionism and think that giving it a name that ends on ism is an excuse to not believe it. Well, of course you can insist to just not believe reductionism is correct, but this is denying scientific evidence. We do not guess, we know that brains are made of particles. And
so I'm going to stop right there because it goes on different, and don't get me, we'll get to the rest of it because there's a lot of great stuff here, but there's so much stuff that goes on. The talk about we know, or you can deny. Again, it seems like if those things are the case, and you heard her explain it herself, whatever we see happening was determined at the Big Bang. She just told you that. But at the same time, she's talking about you denying something, as if you had the ability not to. Isn't that crazy? Or at least, unless I'm hearing it wrong. You're denying science. What could I possibly do that was determined that I was going to deny science at the beginning of the Big Bang? What are you upset about? That's what's so odd when I hear determinists talk, whether they're theistic determinists or atheistic determinists, like you just heard here. They talk as if there are other options, and they're here in front of you trying to get you to choose an option that you currently aren't on. And I'm thinking, well, if you're telling me that there's only one, why are we even talking? What are you trying to persuade me of? Here's the other thing. We know. If determinism is true, I don't know that you could know anything. Because what she's saying is going on seems to be this mechanistic process of atoms and neurons that are firing, and that whatever we do is a product of the firing of those neurons, the physical chemical actions, and whatever environment that we're in, our programming and the environment. And some result pops out. Well, that sounds an awful lot like a computer to me. And if I was to put into this computer in front of me, like 5 plus 5, I imagine I would get the number 10. Now, could I then say that the computer knows what 5 plus 5 is? Or would I say that the computer simply responded based on its programming to my input, the input of its environment? That seems more the case. My computer just did what it's programmed to do. I couldn't say that my computer believes anything, denies anything. I couldn't even tell you that the computer knows that 5 plus 5, that the answer 10 to 5 plus 5 is the correct answer. I don't even think it knows that. The concept of knowing to something that's subject to a mechanistic process, as she described, seems impossible. I don't know how you can get to that conclusion. But I just wanted to illustrate for you. Most of what she said, the believing, the denying, the knowing, all of those things seem only possible if you have a will. But if, like she's describing, you're just some kind of a chemical, physical meat bag, and you just respond to things that happen, I don't know by virtue of what she's talking about knowing anything. How do you, again, ascribe a truth value to something that you're just responding to physically? I don't know how you do that. Now, maybe there's an answer for that, and I haven't heard it, and I've been reading, trying to find it. But this idea of emergent quality, supervenient qualities of those kinds of things, again, don't seem to explain it because, again, it doesn't show that it can come from the materialistic world. what I love about this person here, I should know what her name is. Well, it was on the video. I think she's exactly right. Well, her understanding of materialism is the understanding of materialism that what I hear and read about. That's your strong version. But if her strong version is correct, there's a lot of what she says in there that just seems insane. If you really believe it, and I've said it before when I was talking about Calvinism, I don't think anybody believes in determinism. Why? Because nobody acts like it. Nobody acts like you're a robot and you just respond to whatever happens and you're not responsible for your activities. She's talking as if you believe one thing, you could actually believe something different than you believe. She's talking that you can believe something, which does not go, that's also not something that materialism can give you as beliefs. But she seems to think that you can. And so this is why when I go back to this thing where Richard Lewontin says, I think this is exactly what he's talking about. Let me see if I can pull it up here. There it is. Our willingness to accept scientific claims, he's talking about materialists here, that are against common sense is the key to an understanding of the real struggle between science and the supernatural. We take the side of science, even though this is just me talking. I don't think there's any sides to be taken. Science is part of God. I mean, God created it. Well, he didn't create science, but people who believed in God created science. That was wrong. We take the side of science in spite of the patently absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises with health and life, in spite of the tolerance, and this is what I think is clear, the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories because we have a prior commitment to materialism. That's what I think this young woman is demonstrating. It's not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, we're forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive. And this video is counterintuitive, whatever she's saying, as I'm listening to it. It's 100% counterintuitive. No matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated, moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. And I think that's really what this comes down to. Materialism is a way for some atheists to hide from God. That's just me talking. You don't have to believe it. Again, I'm the least credible person talking about any of this stuff, but that's my impression. People need a way to suppress the reality of God, because I think everybody knows. And I think materialism is one way that you can hide from that reality, because some of the things that they bring up, like what you just heard, and we're going to get to the rest of it, probably in the next video. I'm not going to do it now. It's just craziness. And this is the final part, the part that I disagree with. Eminent Kant scholar Louis Beck used to say that anyone who could believe in God could believe in anything. Well, again, I disagree. And I think that the video that I just showed you was a prime example of somebody who, she seems almost to be beside herself. On the one hand, you're a robot and everything that's happened at this moment was predetermined. So whatever that happens in the next moment, it's predetermined. And so why she feels like I can persuade you, or you should believe this or should believe that, just seems wholly incompatible with whatever she's talking about, this materialism. It seems crazy. Now, here's the other thing. When she talked about these differential equations where if you could figure out, all the chemical, all the physics and those things, you could actually predict what's going to happen. I think there's something to that. I think she's correct. Of course, what would I know? But my point is, and I'll develop this down the road. I'm still doing research on this one because I don't want to talk out of turn, which is what I normally do. But I think she has something right. I think that the idea of chance or probability is something that we see from our side of the curtain. I think that if you knew everything that was going on, if you had perfect knowledge, if you're omniscient, there's no such thing as chance. I think that that's the case. I think that's along the lines of what she alluded to. I don't think she believes that for a second. Maybe she does. Anyway, we'll get to that in another. But I think there's some truth in that differential equation stuff, but I don't think it has the outcome or the conclusion that she thinks. The point is this. Anybody who has an a priori commitment, like Lewontin said, to some idea, I don't care what the idea is, at some point, the chances that that idea is going to run out of the of explanatory resources. There's going to be something that happens that you're just not going to be able to explain because of this worldview you have. Because all of our worldviews are just imperfect. We don't know everything. Everything we believe probably isn't correct. Anybody who thinks that everything I believe is 100% correct, you're an idiot. Most of what we understand, it's probably, I don't mean idiot in a bad way, but you are kind of an idiot if you think that. The point is that the real world is the real world. And if we're encountering phenomena that our worldview, our little schema doesn't seem to work with, if that thing is real, then we got to change up the schema. We've got to get rid of this prior commitment to that worldview and adopt a worldview that can explain that phenomena. And I think that there's one worldview that can, and obviously you know what that is. But listen, there are challenges to that one too that need to be explained and need to be dealt with. The point is, once you lock yourself into an idea, you become dogmatic. Once you become dogmatic, you become ignorant. Because you have to, we were reading in the Blackwell Companion there's a location problem. There's this phenomenon out there. How do I locate it in my particular worldview? And if I can't locate it in there, then I got to pretend like it isn't real. And that's what knuckleheads do. I shouldn't talk. She's not a knucklehead. She's a smart person. Don't get me wrong. But it's crazy to say that you're a robot and everything was determined, but now let me try and persuade you to know something. Doesn't seem like it makes sense. All right, that's enough out of me. We're going to get, I'll finish this video next time because there's a lot of good stuff. I just wanted to demonstrate to you that the idea that only people who believe in God can believe crazy things, I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. I don't agree with that. Anybody, whether you believe in God or whether you believe or not, you can believe some insane things by making yourself a slave to an idea. Materialists do it. People who believe in God do it. They make themselves slaves to these crazy theologies, and they're not giving them up no matter what, reality tells them. And I just think that that's a bad idea for anybody. All right, I'm out of here. I'm repeating myself now. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for subscribing, and I appreciate all of the support you guys are giving me. We'll be back next week, and we'll return to this next week because it's some fascinating stuff. But take care of yourselves and be safe and whatever. All right.